Prologue. The starship shuddered. Another bolt lashed through the ether and ripped at the ship's exposed flank. Somewhere a klaxon sounded, unheeded and unceasing. Smoke drifted through the darkened corridors. In the blood-red emergency lighting, the creeping smoke was surreal, a living creature crawling towards the remnant of the crew. Hissing to herself in fury, she surveyed the scene in the control room through the dying eyes of the pilot. Struggling to obey her and to stay alive, he fought back the clutching fingers of death. The pain in his chest subsided and he tried to reach the screens with his right hand. In a haze, he realized that he no longer had a right hand. Using his left, he finally managed to hit the controls. "You cannot die yet," her command thundered through his fading brain. "Focus on the readings! Focus, damn you!" He finally forced his head to turn far enough to see the figures on the screen. Dimly, he knew that they meant that the shields about most of the craft had collapsed. Several sections had been gutted, and whoever had been in them had been either fried or sucked into the void. Their attacker had finished this pass and was returning to make another. It would undoubtedly be the final one. Already, the crippled starship was hanging together almost entirely through the force of her mind. "Imbeciles!" she screamed, and within their minds they all felt her contempt and fury, those that were still alive. She could sense no more than a dozen left to her now. In a spasm of rage, she wrenched her mind away from the pilot and felt him die. Normally, she would have hovered nearby, licking mentally at his death throes. Now there was no time to enjoy herself. In moments, she too might be dead. She slipped into the mind of the navigator. He was still almost whole and began the scans that she had ordered. This far out from the hub of Mutter's spiral, there were very few possible havens for her. The figures scrolled upwards. Only one planet that could sustain humanoid life in the small sun system ahead of them. Not that she needed such an environment to live in, but her slaves would. The other worlds showed up as totally unsuitable for her purposes, no life of any kind. As for the third planet, she cursed at the results. Life, yes, but no intelligence. No radio waves, no radioactivity, no signs of industrializations. Useless, completely useless. The captain's panicked thoughts broke through her waves of fury, and she burrowed into his mind. He was once again becoming frantic with fear as their attacker swung about to begin the final assault, the barrage that they could never survive. She forced herself to become calm. Well, this third world would have to do. Without technology, she would be trapped there. But if there was life, then she could feed and survive. In time, what she needed might become available, if she managed to escape this attack. Enclosed within her life pod, she started the launch sequence. But she would need to camouflage her escape. If they knew she was bailing out, the others would hunt her down. She had to do this very carefully indeed. She reinforced her grip on the navigator's mind and made him change the ship's heading. Dropping the remaining useless shields, she had the hands she controlled start the overload sequence on the reactor core. The countdown began. Her thought turned to the captain, and she made him maneuver the ship about. Then she triggered the drive units and propelled her dying ship directly into the path of the oncoming aggressor. "Taste this!" she screamed mentally in defiance at her old foes. One of her slender talons hovered over the trigger. There was just one final act to perform. The last 11 crew members were barely clinging to their foolish lives. Well, there was still something that they could do for her. They could die. She sent the command, feeding off their final energies, feeling her own mind grow slightly stronger with each death. There was no time to savour the feasting, so she was forced to rush. She had no idea when she might be able to feed again. When they were dead, she hit the release. Space surrounded her. She barely had time to register the bulk of her tattered ship rushing past her before it exploded, showering slivers of debris across her field of vision. The explosion would have blanked her attackers' sensors long enough for them to have missed her escape. She switched from drive to standard, slipping back into normal space-time. The wreckage faded from about her tiny craft. With luck, the blast would have damaged the attacking ship. The third planet hung below her. It was half lit by the light of its sun and gleamed blue and white. It was almost like home. She began a closer scan and cursed as each of the indications confirmed what she had read from the main ship. No concentrations of electromagnetic power, no emissions of exhaust gases, no transport systems, no communication signals. Whatever life was here was so primitive as to be totally useless to her. She needed intelligence, not simply animal life. She couldn't feed from uncomprehending beasts. Without minds to plunder, she would die. That pretty little globe below would become her tomb. Abruptly, an alarm sounded. Glancing at the screens again, she saw that the pod had been damaged. She had left her escape too late. The thrusters were almost empty of fuel, and she was losing control of the small vessel. Gravity was pulling her into the planet's embrace. She found herself enjoying the irony of the situation. Having escaped and taken control of the starship and fled across space, she was going to die in this barren, lifeless wasteland. It would all end here. Was it better to die in the flames of planetary entry, or later, alone and starving for the only food she could eat? After all of her efforts, to die like this, in solitude, in this wretched spot, this wasteland planet of blue and white and green.